University. Good day, Philippines. Good day, Bohol. This is Julia May Taladua, bringing you the latest, hottest, and most wanted news of the hour. For the headlines, at the end of this report, the students are expected to performance standards. Define a performance standards. Discuss a mathematical performance standards and its importance. Differentiate content standards and performance standards. For performance competencies, define the concept of learning competency. Differentiate learning competencies and learning outcomes. Construct a well-written learning competency. For performance objectives, define a performance objectives. Construct a well-written performance objectives. According to the National Research Council of 2001, standard serves as a basis educational reform across the nation as educators and policymakers respond to the call for a clear definition of desired outcomes of schooling and a way to measure student success in terms of these outcomes. These are the broad overarching goals that define semesters, units, and the year. It is what the teacher teaches and what the student learns. Here are some examples of standards. Students will use numbers effectively for various purposes, such as counting, measuring, estimating, and problem solving. Second, use appropriate mathematical vocabulary, symbols, and notations with understanding based on the prior conceptual work. There are many national organizations that have academic standards published. This includes things like the National Council for Teachers of Mathematics or the National Council for Teachers of English. And these standards are often presented in grade level bands, such as grade 6 through grade 8 or grade 9 through grade 12. All states have academic standards that have been published that their students must meet. Almost all states use the Common Core State Standards or the CCSS. Also important in the 21st century setting are the International Society for Technology and Education Standards, and this organization publishes standards for teachers and students. And these are essentially what students need to know in the digital world. Standards can be presented in many ways. You can have content standards or performance standards. The first challenge is understanding what each term means. It is difficult to define all the keywords without terms overlapping. Some states have fused all the different types of standards into one. Some are still presenting lists of content standards along with the performance standards. And it is therefore important that we understand the different types of standards so as to differentiate between content standards and performance standards.
According to DepEd Order No. 8, Series of 2015, content standards cover a specified scope of sequential topics within each learning strand, domain, theme, or component. It answers the question, what should learners know? It is the actual content that students should learn. These are the broad statements that describe specific content areas that groups of students should learn at each grade level. They define the knowledge within each discipline, subject, or topics. An example, the learners will demonstrate understanding of key concepts of algebraic expressions, the properties of real numbers as applied in linear equations and inequalities in one variable. This example shows the actual content that students should learn, which is the key concepts of algebraic expression and the properties of real numbers. According to the DepEd Order No. 8, Series of 2015, performance standards describe the abilities and skills that learners are expected to demonstrate in relation to the content standards and integration of the 21st century skills. It answers the following questions. What can learners do with what they know? How well must learners do their work? How well do learners use their learning or understanding in different situations? How do learners apply their learning or understanding in real-life contexts? And lastly, what tools and measures should the learners use to demonstrate what they know? In a nutshell, according to DepEd Order No. 8, Series of 2015, performance standards expresses the degrees or quality of proficiency that students are expected to demonstrate in relation to the content standards. It provides clear expectations for instruction, assessment, and student at work. It also helps teachers assess the extent to which the students have acquired the knowledge and apply the skills learned. It also demonstrates conceptual understanding of the content and skill acquisition. And lastly, performance standards represents real life or authentic tasks. Performance standards provides clear expectation for instruction, assessment, and student work. They define the level of work that demonstrate achievement of the standards, enabling the teacher to know how good is good enough. Performance standards isolate and identify skills needed for problem solving, reasoning, communicating, and making connections with other information. They also tell the teacher how to assess the extent to which the student knows the materials or can manipulate and apply the information. For example, the learner is able to model situations using oral, written, graphical, and algebraic methods in solving problems involving algebraic expressions, linear equations, and inequalities in one variable. This example describes the abilities and the skills that the learners are expected to demonstrate in this topic, which is the learners should have the skill to model a situation using oral, written, graphical, and algebraic methods. Now let's compare content standard and performance standard using the following examples. Content standard. The learner demonstrates understanding of key concept of inequalities in a triangle and parallel and perpendicular lines. This states the actual content the students will learn. In this case, the knowledge of the key concepts of inequalities in a triangle is the content the student will learn. While in the performance standards, the learner is able to communicate mathematical thinking with coherence and clarity in formulating, investigating, analyzing, and solving real-life problems involving triangle inequalities and parallelism and perpendicularity of lines using appropriate and accurate representations. This states the skills the students will demonstrate, which is to communicate mathematical thinking with coherence and clarity, and also to solve real-life problems. Basically, performance standards relate to content standards. Performance standards must base the skills the students will demonstrate to the content standards. Hence, we cannot create a performance standards without a content standards. Next example, the content standard. The learner demonstrates understanding of key concepts of polynomial function. The knowledge the students will know is the key concepts of the polynomial function. Performance standards. The learner is able to conduct systematically a mathematical investigation involving polynomial functions in different fields. The skills they will demonstrate is to conduct systematically a mathematical investigation. Conducting systematically a mathematical investigation was based on the knowledge of the key concepts of polynomial functions. Now that we know what is performance standards, let's apply it in mathematics. Mathematics is the language that defines the blueprint of the universe. Mathematics is woven into all parts of our lives, and it is more than a list of skills to be mastered. The essence of mathematics is the ability to employ critical thinking and reasoning to solve problems. To be successful in mathematics, one must see mathematics as sensible, useful, and worthwhile. Why do we have standards for mathematics? According to the 2011 Huming Mathematics Content and Performance Standards, we have standards for mathematics because first, it provides students, parents, and educators focus and coherence through application and understanding of mathematical concepts and processes. It aligned vertically from K to 12 with clearly defined goals and outcomes for learning. It emphasized conceptual understanding. It encouraged multiple models, representations, and strategies. And lastly, it incorporated technological applications that optimize mathematical understanding and application. The second reason is it develops students' mathematical thinking. It develops reasoning, solving, representing, proving, communicating, and connecting across contexts and applications. It promotes habits of mind recognizing or identifying mathematics in the world around us. It engages students in making sense building conceptual understanding, developing procedural fluency, and employing adaptive reasoning. And lastly, it builds constructive attitudes to see mathematics as sensible, useful, and worthwhile, and increase beliefs in one's own ability to do mathematics. The third reason is it develops students' ability to use mathematical language with care and precision in communicating concepts, skills, symbols, and vocabulary of mathematics. And the last reason is it drives professional development to improve student learning. What are the mathematics performance standards? Mathematics performance standards define experiences that build understanding of mathematics and ways of thinking through which students develop, apply, and assess their mathematical skills. Develop mathematical skills. Students make sense of quantities and their relationships in situations by sifting through available information to construct an approach for solving the problem. Students persevere in the development of a variety of approaches. Apply mathematical skills. Students take complex scenarios and distill important quantities and their relationships by looking for patterns and making use of structure. Then, they apply appropriate models and use appropriate tools to derive a solution. Students maintain oversight of the process while attending to the details as they work to solve a problem. Assess mathematical skills. Students are critical consumers of the skills and processes they adopt from other sources and are able to consider the efficiency and effectiveness of a variety of methods. Students apply precision in communicating processes and solutions. They explain why and how various methods succeed or fail. The standards for mathematical skills establishes habits of mind and empowers students to become mathematically literate and informed citizens. Why are the standards of mathematical skills are important? According to the 2011 Huming Mathematics Content and Performance Standards, algorithmic knowledge is no longer sufficient when preparing our students to become globally competitive. The knowledge of good practitioners goes beyond algorithmic learning and allows them to picture the problem and the many roads that may lead to absolution. They realize that mathematics is applicable outside the classroom and are confident in their ability to apply mathematical concepts to all aspects of life. The symbiotic nature of the standards of mathematical skills allows students to deepen their understanding of mathematical concepts and cultivates their autonomy as mathematically literate and informed citizens. Employing mathematics as a means of synthesizing complex concepts and making informed decisions is paramount to success in all post-secondary endeavors. Here are some examples of performance standards in mathematics. First one, the learner is able to apply addition and subtraction of whole numbers up to 100 including money in mathematical problems and real-life situations. Second, the learner is able to investigate, analyze, and solve problems involving parallelograms and triangle similarity through appropriate and accurate representation. Third, the learner is able to formulate and solve accurately problems involving radicals. Fourth, the learner is able to formulate and solve practical problems involving probability of simple events. And lastly, the learner is able to formulate real-life problems involving factors of polynomials, rational algebraic expressions, linear equations and inequalities in two variables, systems of linear equations and inequalities in two variables, and linear functions, and solve these problems accurately using a variety of strategies.
Question here. Should teachers make the content and performance standards? Well, performance standards along with the content standards are not made by the teachers, but it is made by the education and curriculum designers or planners. However, teachers can find them through these different resources. The first one is the budget of works. It is a resource material for teaching multi-grade classes that contains K-12 basic education curriculum, competencies, skills, and objectives, topics for specific skills and competencies, and teaching strategies, activities, and the time allotment arranged into columns for easy reference annotations. The second one is the learners or the learning materials. Learning materials means any course materials or any academic materials developed, created, or used by the faculty, students, or administrations in connection with the facilitation or evaluation of the student learning outcomes. The other two are the teacher's guide and the curriculum guide. I think that would be all for the performance standards. Now let's proceed to the second topic, which is the performance competencies. Competencies are the standards in which you base your assessment of the people or the students. For further details, we have our reporter, Ms. Jella Ampit. Jella, kindly update our viewers.
Hello and good day, Miss Julia. And for my account, we will discuss the topic about competencies. For teachers to design a good lesson, they must understand that competencies are the core of designing contents, activities, and assessments. Competencies represent the lifelong skills expected for every learner to master and become a way of life. When teachers understand competencies, they will be able to utilize these competencies into smart objectives, meaningful activities, and appropriate assessments. Now for the definition of competency. A competency is the capability to apply or use a set of related knowledge, skills, and skills acquired to successfully perform work functions in a defined work setting. Competencies are conserved as services for skill standards that specify the level of knowledge, skills, and abilities required to success in the workplace, as well as a potential measurement criteria assessing competency attainment. For learning competencies, according to DepEd, it refers to the knowledge, understanding, skills, and attitudes that students need to demonstrate in every lesson and or learning activity. Learning competency is also called goals. Here are the specified guidelines in writing learning competencies. 1. Outline the major skills or big pictures ideas you are teaching to your students. 2. Tell what you want your learners to be able to do by the end of the course. To achieve a well-written learning competency, there are elements that must be present and must be followed. The first one is a well-written learning competency must begin with an action verb. Only one verb. Second, a well-written learning competency must be clear and concise. Third, a well-written learning competency must include a student behavior you can observe and measure. And next, a well-written learning competency must avoid the words know, learn, and understand. Here are the comparison of a good and a poor examples of a learning competency. First, we have a good example. Perform venipuncture. And its poor example is understand venipuncture. Why is it a poor example? It is because the statement used the word understand, and using the word understand is hard to measure and cannot be observed by the teachers. Next, for good example, implement infection control strategies. Its poor examples, be aware of infection control strategies. It is an example of a poor learning competencies because awareness is difficult to define or measure. Third example, good examples. Obtain a health history. Poor examples, know how to obtain a health history. It is a poor type of learning competencies because it is using the word knowing how, which is hard or cannot be observed by the teachers. To understand more the concept of learning competencies, we have the example of learning competencies of a grade 8 mathematics. We have its content, which is geometry. its content standards, it demonstrates understanding of key concepts of inequalities in a triangle and parallel and perpendicular lines. Its performance standards is able to communicate mathematical thinking with coherence and clarity in formulating, investigating, analyzing, and solving real-life problems involving triangle inequalities and parallelism and perpendicularity of lines using appropriate and accurate representations. As we can see, there is learning competencies. Every learning competencies of this grade 8 mathematics is brief and concise. It only has one action verb and it avoids using the word know, learn, and understand. For example, it illustrates theorems on triangle inequalities or exterior angle inequality theorem, triangle inequality theorem, hinge theorem. Another example, it applies theorems on triangle inequalities. Proves inequalities in a triangle, proves properties of parallel lines cut by transversal, and determines the conditions under which lines and segments are parallel or perpendicular. With those learning competencies, we can say that a general statement that a competency is a general statement that describes the desired knowledge, skills, and behaviors of a student. Competencies commonly define the applied skills and knowledge that enable people to successfully perform in professional, educational, and other life contexts. Students are the artists, scientists, thinkers, innovators, and leaders of the future. They will be tasked with solving the problems of today while imagining and creating a new tomorrow. Competencies are critical for equipping students with the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that they will need to successfully navigate their personal journeys of learning, living, and working. Students use and develop competencies when they encounter unfamiliar or challenging situations. Competencies help students draw and build upon what they know, how they think, and what they can do. In school, students develop and apply competencies through subject area content and learning experiences. And that will be all for my topic all about competencies. I hope you learn and gain knowledge from it. This is me, Chalampi, reporting from Valencia, Bohol. Back to you, Miss Julia.
Thank you so much for that, Miss Jella. Now moving on to the next news about the performance objectives, we have our next reporter, Miss Daisy Regadas. Daisy, can you tell us more about this topic?
Have a nice day to you, Julia, and to all our viewers. So our next topic or report is all about the performance objectives. The performance objectives is the specific knowledge and skills within a specific time frame. It supports the identified performance standard and competency which was reported earlier. It is the direction-setting outcome-based statements. So meaning to say, performance objectives is specific in the end result. It describes the measurable contribution of the transport system to achieving the goals. When teachers develop unit objectives, they should ask themselves the question, what do I want my students to be able to do by the end of the unit? Or meaning to say, what do I want my students to learn or identified and gain at the end of the unit?
Performance objectives should be SMART. So SMART is an acronym that you can use to guide your goal setting. That is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. First is specific. Performance objectives must be very clear and detailed enough so as to leave no room for ambiguity or misinterpretation. It must be simple and sensible. Your goal should be clear and specific.
Otherwise, you won't be able to focus your efforts or feel thoroughly motivated to achieve it. When drafting your goal, try to answer the 5W questions. What do I want to accomplish? Why is this goal important? Who is involved? Where is it located? Which resources or limits are involved? Second is measurable. Always use a verifiable verb and describe an action that can be seen and measured. It must be meaningful and motivating. It's important to have measurable goals so that you can track your progress and stay motivated. Assessing progress helps you to stay focused, meet your deadlines, and feel the excitement of getting closer to achieving your goal. Next is achievable. Performance objectives should be always achievable. It must be agreed and attainable. Your goal also needs to be realistic to be successful. Next, relevant. Performance objectives should be relevant to the performer. They should relate to the objectives that matter to that person. Last one is time-bound. Performance objectives are more effective if they are to be achieved within a definite time frame. Thus, it must be time-based, time-limited, time or cost-limited, timely, and time-sensitive. Writing objectives. First, you should write one sentence for each objective. Use an action verb for each objective. Avoid identifying the product. Stick to what you want them to know and or be able to do. Make sure objectives are measurable. Omit behavioral objectives and any objective that isn't clearly measurable or is subjective. So we have here a unit example that will identify the performance standard, competency, and learning objectives. So we have for the grade level 3 with the subject mathematics under the branch of geometry. First is standard. Since standard is the basis of education, so our example here is also the basis of what we want students to learn. So we have here the common core state standards for grade 3 students in the subject geometry. Reasons with shapes and their attributes. So for the competency, since it is the general statement that describes the desired knowledge, so we can have the students will divide a variety of shapes into equal areas. Students will create fractions based on the shape division. So this competency or the general statement based on the standards, which is actually the basis of education, as what said earlier. So the last one we have is the learning objectives. So the learning objectives is specific statement. So we can have here, students will learn to divide a square into 4 equal parts. So we specific in having a 4 equal parts.
That is all about performance objectives. This is Desiree Galas all the way from Ubay, Bohol. Now back to the studio.
Thank you so much, Miss Desiree. And those were the top stories for this hour. Again, this is Julia Mitaladwa bringing you the latest, hottest, and most wanted news of the hour. Thank you for being with us.